All right, everybody. Welcome back to another subsection of Section 1 of our policy course. And in this subsection, we're going to be talking about policy models. Policy models are just kind of ways to think about the policy process, right? They're different kind of ways you can look at how policy is made or what policies are implemented versus not, which policies are chosen or not, right? And um, these are just kind of helpful for you to be able to, think about this process and different ways you can see, or different kind of, I guess, backgrounds or frameworks that you can use to kind of look at how policy is made, right? So, first one we're going to talk about here is political systems theory, all right? And this sees the policymaking process in kind of a black box. So how policy is really actually done is just kind of hand waved over. This really sees policy making as a series of inputs and outputs, right? So on the input side, you have the demands, you have the policy advocacy, you have people coming to the government with hey, this is a problem, crime is a problem, or homelessness is a problem, or whatever. And then inside the black box, some policy is decided upon, and then there's a series of outputs, right? There's laws and regulations and policies that come out the other end. But then importantly, that feeds back, right? That changes the situation, changes how tax money is being allocated, or changes the level of crime, or changes something in the real world, which kind of then changes the demands and supports that are coming in the other side, right? So this sees kind of the policy process as a cycle. You get the demands, you get the outputs, the laws and the policies, that feeds back to more or different demands, and it kind of views this policy making process as this cycle that is never ending and just keeps going around and around and around, and policies change and are modified or grow or shrink or whatever over time. Second one we're going to talk about is group theory. And group theory kind of sees everything about the policy making process and the governing process as a struggle between groups, right? So maybe it's environmentalists as a group and oil companies as a group, and they have competing desires and wants, and they want something different from their government, from the policy. So they're going to approach the government and ask the government to do different things depending on which one of those groups those people are members of, right? So group theory kind of sees a lot of how policy is done as a matter of access. Which groups have access to legislatures or the president or the courts? Which groups are those policymakers listening to? Which groups are they kind of siding with? But everything is kind of coming in as a struggle between these groups, and one group is going to have more access or less access, or more money and less money, or more membership and fewer membership, or whatever. And then the legislature or the president or the courts or whoever is just there to kind of referee that struggle between groups, and then kind of determine a winner and pass a policy based on which group does the best job of pushing their particular group's interests, right? Now, similar to group theory is elite theory. And this still says that there's kind of two groups that are attempting to fight over different matters of policy and process and everything. But with the elite theory is really focused on kind of the differing amounts of capital, whether it's political capital or, economic capital. And some groups are going to have a lot of that, and some groups just don't, right? So under elite theory, it's the small group of elites, i.e. rich people or major corporations or um, kind of the people who have the power and the money and the social capital and all those things that essentially get to run the government. They get to run the legislature. They get to be president or support the president or whatever. And then those elites are going to pass laws and policies that allow their group to remain in power. Now, occasionally, the elites want to maintain their power, their group dynamics, their ability to kind of keep them the elite. And they're only going to do enough to kind of help non-elites that they need to do in order to maintain that system. So, you know, if the elites only ever focused on what helps them, the system would relatively quickly break down and there would be some kind of collapse or revolution, or, you know, that government wouldn't last that long. So they throw kind of just enough kind of scraps, I guess, to the non-elites as they really need to do to maintain this power dynamic. There's some migration from non-elite to elite, i.e., you know, some people who grew up very poor with no social, economic, or political power can ultimately make it into that elite group, but it's relatively rare, not nearly as common as that whole American dream thing might imply, right? I should tie in, if you're watching this and you're interested in this, you should definitely check out my criminological theory course and look at Merton's strain theory, because this kind of ties in with all that. But ultimately, it's the elites and the haves, i.e. the rich, usually, that are running the government and allowing their side to win with just enough of a kind of giveaway to the non-elites that it maintains the preservation of the system. And this process just keeps going and going, you know, for what, 250 years now plus. Institutionalism, this is all about kind of the structures and arrangements and procedures of how government actually works, right? So this is the kind of policy model that looks at things like the filibuster, or looks at things like the presidential veto, or, you know, they're really concerned with, or this model, I should say, is very concerned with exactly what that process is supposed to look like, what it actually looks like, what are the rules, what are the processes, how does policy actually get passed. You know, everything from the House of Representatives and the Senate and the President and the state houses and governors and city councils, how do their rules and procedures help some groups and hurt some groups, and what policies are more likely and less likely to pass in different systems. And but it's all a focus on kind of what those procedures and rules and processes are for these different levels of government that are really important in how policy gets passed and which policies get passed and all those things. Now, rational choice theory, not to be confused with the rational choice theory from my criminology course, but honestly pretty close. This is kind of sees policy as a series of rational choices by individuals, right? So essentially this theory says that all voters and all policy advocates and political party leaders and politicians and legislators and presidents and all those, everybody is a rational decision maker. And they are going to determine what is in their self-interest, what is best for me. And they're going to use that to make decisions about policy, what to pass, what to block, what to vote for, what to vote against. Kind of everything we do, from choosing who to vote for to choosing what policies to advocate, is all a rational choice based on our own self-interest. And that self-interest is usually economic, i.e. what's going to make me the most money, So if I'm a billionaire, of course my self-interest is in lower taxes. If I'm a poor working class person, my self-interest is going to be strong unions. But it's not necessarily economic interest, right? So people have rational choices that are not necessarily in their economic self-interest. For instance, somebody who owns a home advocating for homelessness prevention and programs to address homelessness. Obviously, that's not in their self-interest because they are not homeless. Or an adult advocating for more more protections for crimes against children. They're not a child, so it's not in their direct self-interest for that kind of thing. So rational choice theory is really just focused on the fact that every single person, whether they're a regular citizen or somebody in a state legislature or the president, is making all their decisions on what policies to support, what policies to propose, what policies to oppose, based on their own self-interest that they have decided on based on this rationality. And there are a lot of issues with a lot of the assumptions in that one, but we'll get to that later. Now, the final thing I'm going to say about these policy models is that no one way to look at how policy is made is perfect. You might find yourself leaning towards one or another of the ones I just talked about. You might go out on your own time and find some others that you can use that are more clearly kind of how you see the policy process. But don't get focused on any one over and above the others. Because again, these are just kind of mental models on how to look at the governing process and the policy process. These aren't etched in stone. These aren't, legal requirements that one of these has to be true and all of the others are false. Honestly, they're all useful in different situations as a mental model to view how different policies or different types of policies are either passed or not passed. And you have to really be careful of confirmation bias. And confirmation bias, which again we're going to be talking about a lot later on in this course, is just where if I have an idea of what's true or how something works, I'm only going to seek out sources that agree with me. If I have very strong political views, I'm only going to watch news channels that tell me what I already think and what I already believe. I'm not going to find either a news channel or social media connections that go against what I already believe. It kind of puts people in this bubble where everybody around them, everybody on their TV, everybody in their social media feeds, everybody in their YouTube feeds, kind of agrees with what they have to say, and thus they never get challenged, they never hear outside viewpoints. So when looking at these models, try to not grab onto the one that you really liked when I first talked about them and say, oh, that's the right one, that's the one that clearly describes how policy is made. Kind of use all of them. And anyway, that is the lesson. So that's the end of section 1. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it.